Hey everybody, welcome to the latest episode of The Gray Area. A lot to get to after the season finale against the Bears. The regular season is over. The Lions season is over, but the conversation's really just getting started. We'll talk about what we learned from that game, go over some numbers over narratives, as I always do on Game Week. Something brand new called the Dan Cam. Dan Campbell had a lot to say on Monday at his press conference. We'll talk about some of that. Plus a salute to Taylor Decker. That dude deserves it. And we got to take a look at what is on the road ahead, because at this point, that's all that there is left for the Detroit Lions. Let's get into it. Before I get started, please do all of the YouTube things every YouTube head says to please do. The subscription, please like this if you're so inclined, hit the thumbs up, the little notification bell, all that stuff helps us do what we do and keep the content free. I want to start with what we learned, and I'll start with my lesson, and that's first to worst, those margins are razor thin. And you saw it in both directions in the NFC North, where three teams landed with 9 wins, and only one of them is going to the postseason. The other two are going home, all because of a stupid tie against the Dallas Cowboys for the Green Bay Packers. That's what saved them. Is a terrible game played in Dallas against the boys. And you see this throughout the league, but especially in the NFC North where things were really, really tight. The halftime adjustments, an injury here or there, a drive-killing penalty, not being quite on the details in a week of preparation. All of these tiny little things that coaches harp on, and I think fans and media probably get tired of hearing, oh, it's about the details. We got to take care of us, and it's about this week, and we're only worried about today, and we're going one day at a time, and on and on and on and on and on. You get asked the same questions as an athlete or coach. You're going to give the same answers. I don't fault them for that, but I think most people roll their eyes or they stop listening to it, but it matters because each one of those tiny little details, each one of those practices, each one of those days adds up to the margin between first place, 15 wins, and fourth place and 9 and not going to the playoffs at all. Conversely, a couple of things fell the Bears' way. They had a negative point differential for most of the season. They were making their living off of turnovers, but that was enough to get them 2 extra wins and take them from last place to winning the NFC North for the first time in a minute. Now, I don't know how good they are because the first place team in the NFC North lost to the last place team in the NFC North twice. And that goes back to the margin question. It is so easy to lose sight of the fact that you can just do a couple of things wrong and all of a sudden your season's a failure despite being a 4th straight winning season, something that Lions media pointed out, and I wish they hadn't happened since the late 60s and early 70s. Quick points to Lion PR. Admin, you're normally on point, but trying to celebrate 4 straight winning seasons when everybody's really still sour about not going to the playoffs and how things ended, read the room. Maybe that one wasn't it. Maybe we've got our head down. We're working really hard towards 2026 because we don't want this to happen again. But those margins from first to worst are razor thin. Another thing we learned, the offense is really close. And I know this runs counter to the narrative that you're going to hear in a lot of places that, oh, without Ben Johnson, they need a play caller and Dan Campbell can't be doing this. And Jared Goff's terrible under pressure, and a lot of narratives that are not going to die. And this offense was top 10 and top 5 in most categories throughout the entire year with John Morton calling plays, and then even better with Dan Campbell calling plays. And that was with the offensive line in shambles. But for the Frank Ragnow of it all, this offensive line needs to be repaired. It needs to be put back together. And then you can see everything else that you need to see from this offense. They looked pretty good against Chicago going in with a battered offensive line, no Penei Sewell, not just the best tackle on the team, maybe the best tackle in football. He didn't play a snap, and they were still able to execute. The Lions offense is really close. The Lions offense is the engine that runs the whole damn machine. So that is very encouraging because it had come into question and it has been the target of a lot of criticism. I'm not saying they haven't been without their moments. There are a lot of things that the offense can do better. They can't make up for the offensive line personnel mid-season. That's something that is out of the realm of possibility. It has got to be the focus for the offseason. But this Lions offense is really close. Speaking of that, another thing we learned, Jared Goff narratives are never going away. They will never die. He can't win in cold weather. He just did. He shouldn't wear gloves. Well, he does. He can't play under pressure. Yeah, he can. Some of this is coming up in numbers over narratives. the reliability of Jared Goff in this season, with everything else that went on, the tight end room being decimated, the offensive line being a mess, all of those things, a complete steaming pile at different times in the season, Jared Goff kept humming along. One of the most accurate, one of the most consistent quarterbacks in football. Again, a guy that's top 5 and top 10 in every important category: yards, completion percentage. He played 17 games, didn't miss a snap. And yet the questions are going to continue with this guy because he's not Josh Allen. He can't put on a cape and run a 4.4 40 or stick some guy into the end zone. Nonetheless, Jared Goff's a hell of a quarterback, and he very quietly had a hell of a season that not a lot of people are ever going to pay attention to because the Lions only won 9 games and they didn't get to go to the postseason. Another thing we learned, Dan Campbell's approach as a play caller continued evolving until the end. And I say that because we watched him in week 18, the 17th game of the schedule, taking the points. And he wasn't doing that earlier in the year. He wasn't doing it when John Morton was the play caller. He wasn't doing it when he first picked up the play sheet. And there were times where, myself included, people are pulling their hair out. Just take the early field goal. There's nothing wrong when it's 4th and 4 on the 15 from letting your guy go out there and get you 3 points. You don't need to risk it. And he stuck to that in the Chicago game. You saw that evolution. And I think that's one of those things that takes time, especially when you're burdened with another full-time job that you didn't have until halfway through the season. And make no mistake, that is what being the play caller is. It is another full-time job on top of being the head coach. I'm not sure that he gives it up. Talk about that in a little bit. But he continued evolving until the end. You could tell he was still in the lab and self-scouting and learning and evolving. And that's a positive sign as well. Because at the very least, whether he's a play caller next year or not, you know that he's not going to stop working. He's never going to settle in. He's never going to get too used to just exactly what his system looks like or what his play calling routine is. The man continued to grow and think and evolve with his team. And it ended up winning him a game at the end of the season. And then finally, the Lions are 2-0 against the guy that everybody in the world told you they couldn't win without. Hats off to Ben Johnson for his first season with the Bears. There's nothing but success to be had from a first-place finish in the NFC North, a division title, a home playoff game. City of Chicago is freaking out. I don't know that they have a long playoff run in them. I've got my doubts. I just watched the Lions beat them again. And the Lions tagged them with 52 in the first game. And that's not nothing. Going into next season, which is all that matters now to the Lions have the upper hand on the guy that left them behind and the guy that is now coaching right across Lake Michigan. And that matters in this division where, again, everything is razor thin and nobody is prepped to fall off. You know, we'll get into just exactly what I think of the Lions moving forward and what they've got to do into 2026. But there isn't a reason to believe that Minnesota is going to be any worse than they were this year. There isn't any reason to believe that Green Bay is about to fall off, given the personnel and the coaching that they have available. And I don't think that the Bears are going to get much worse. So this division is going to be a grindhouse. And I've been saying that for weeks. Any advantage you have over your opponent matters, and getting that second win and keeping Ben Johnson at bay, that matters to these Detroit Lions. Time now for numbers over narratives. I will go ahead and warn you in advance. There's a certain amount of cope in these numbers, right? I'm just like anybody else, trying to find the good in a season that didn't go the way that we all wanted it to go. So I'll start with 64%, and that was the completion percentage for Jared Goff, who I just got done telling you is just never going to, he's never going to be out from under the shadow of the narratives until he's holding that big shiny silver trophy. And then even then, I'm not sure. He went into the elements. He played outdoors. It was in the cold. He wore the gloves. 64%. And that's based on another number, 42 pass attempts in that game. A little more than you'd probably want in January in Chicago, but he got it done the way he's gotten it done most of the year. Another number for Jared Goff, 331. Yards passing. The run game still wasn't there. The offensive line still isn't working right. It was better. The run game was better. David Montgomery got involved. Let's not have him throwing too many more passes. I'm not sure we need to see a lot of Wildcat with David Montgomery. It's cute once or twice. Third time, I don't know, probably pushing your luck. But all through all of that, Jared Goff kept chugging, 64% on 42 attempts and 331 yards. That's a dandy day for your quarterback in a big moment when they needed a win. And everybody wanted to go out there and do their best, despite the fact that people would tell you Jared Goff doesn't belong on the field and shouldn't have been out there, and they need to play all the backups and a bunch of other stuff that Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions are never, and write this down in ink, ever going to do. It's just not a part of their DNA. We need to let it go as a fan base. You can think that it's the right way to go, just don't expect it to happen and be disappointed when it doesn't. Another number from the game against Chicago, 0. And that's wins for Ben Johnson over the Detroit Lions. And I hope that number doesn't change for a good little while. I think there's a good chance the Lions get better in the offseason and maybe get ready to take it to Chicago again next year. The psychological edge against a guy like Ben Johnson for Dan Campbell is going to matter. I know it seems silly because they're in the playoffs and the Lions aren't, but they're going to have to play this guy a bunch more. And they're going to have to play Caleb Williams a bunch more. And every advantage that you've got matters. And when you've got a game that doesn't mean anything to you and you go into their barn and you beat them, that matters. Just ask Green Bay. Because that is exactly what launched the Lions in the first place in their last 9-win season when they ended the year by beating the Packers on their home field and ending the Aaron Rodgers era in Wisconsin. These kinds of things matter. Another one that's not about the Lions, but about somebody else, and another number that I think matters, 3,942. That was the season total for yards passing for Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. As many of you may know, 31 teams in the NFL have had a 4,000-yard passer. One team hasn't, ever, in history. And that team is the Chicago Bears. And this was supposed to be the year. Caleb Williams needed 270 yards to get that done, and he came up short. It's salty. It's bitter, right? It's perhaps a little bit childish. But again, keeping your rivals and your division opponents from accomplishing things at your expense gives you a mental edge headed into next year. And it's also nice because it gives Lions that one thing to hold over Bear fans' heads because they are going to be running their yaps in the offseason. And they've earned it. They're in first place. They get to host a playoff game, but they don't get to do it with a 4,000-yard passer. And then finally, 17. That's the number coming out of this where the Lions will draft in the NFL draft. And so higher than in years past. I think there's going to be a lot of draft coverage right here on the Detroit Lions podcast. There's Risden, who is in his draft cave working overtime coming up with draft evals and different things. I've certainly got my thoughts. I think we are on deck to have a roundtable discussion here on the channel. I imagine the draft will come up, as will season-ending comments from Brad Holmes and whatnot. But it's really, really important that the Lions get this one right. They shouldn't be drafting this high anytime soon. They shouldn't be drafting this high this year, but they are. And so you got to take the gifts where you can get them. You got to get this right. There are some major front burner needs for this team. Left tackle, safety, edge, potentially cornerback, all positions that you might want to look at in the first round. I've got my preferences. I won't get into that now. This is mostly about Chicago. But that 17th spot in the NFL draft order is a big, big opportunity for this team. Moving on to something new I'm going to call the Dan Cam. He steps to the mic on Mondays during the regular season, and he answers a lot of questions. Most of them stink. Not all of them, though. And he's a truth teller, I think in a way that a lot of NFL coaches aren't. They will either engage in coach speak or dance around and not answer your question and make a bunch of words, and none of it really means anything. If Dan doesn't like your question or he doesn't want to answer, he just said, I don't want to talk about that right now. But when he does answer, he tends to tell the truth and show everybody just exactly where his head's at. So let's get into that with some of his thoughts, starting with the one about the injuries. Lots of fans and people in the Slack there with the DLP Slack channel. Sign up for that, by the way. It's the best talk. You're going to avoid the social media sewer and everything else. It's just $5 a month. Get you in there with a bunch of lunatic fans who really know their stuff. The injury analysis. What's going on with the injuries? Why are the Lions having so many injuries? Why don't they understand the injuries? Well, it's not like they're not working on it, and he had a lot to say about it, including some of those things about the training staff for the people in the back.
Yeah, I think when you start talking about some of these, it's like, man, look at the soft tissue. That's where I always start, because if you got a major soft tissue issue, then it's more than just the player, in my opinion. There's other factors. We've been great. I mean, we do a great job of preparing our players. When you start talking about, it's an Achilles, unfortunately, those are freak things, man. And so it's, for whatever reason, we've kind of been hit, man. And, and listen, as far as practice, I've done everything, man. I've done from walkthroughs to doing a little bit of both. And so at the end of the day, I know this, you got to get your team prepared to play. And so that's what I'm always going to hang my hat on. I like our training staff. I think they do a hell of a job. I really do. And, it was a tough year in some areas.
So there you have it. They are working on it. He doesn't believe that it's really anything other than bad luck. And when you're looking at non-soft tissue injuries, it's hard to argue with that. You can't prepare for an Achilles. You can't prepare knee cartilage. You can't prep for an MCL. There isn't a bench press for that particular thing. And the Lions are looking at every angle to make sure that it stops being such a consistent story after the last 2 seasons. He also had a lot to say about play calling, including a little bit of shade thrown towards the guy who's now in Chicago.
It's one of the good things. If I did do that, you don't have to worry about somebody else leaving. You don't have to worry about your play caller leaving. So that would be one of the perks of it. But I'm going to think through all of that. And there again, I think I really want to do what I feel is best for the team. And that included, if I believe that's what's best for us, and and I feel good about it, then I will. If I just feel like I don't, then I won't do it. I won't do it.
I think it's worth noting that he said you're not going to lose the play caller if the play caller's you. And I mean, that's only true if you don't get fired. And so that's what he's got to be thinking about as he goes into this offseason. I'm not as convinced as most people are that he's just going to go get a guy to call plays, even though there are some big names out there. And the Lions haven't been able to get involved in the whole Black Monday feeding frenzy with coaches that are available in the last couple of years. Part of that's a price you pay for going to the playoffs. And there are some big names out there. There are the Dables and Stefanskis and these guys that are out there running around. And I don't know if he makes that call. I'm not sure that he doesn't like play calling and that he doesn't trust himself to do it. I think he laced something in that answer when he mentioned, like, hey, man, if I'm doing it, then at least I know I'm going to be here. Because he's had guys leave and he's asked guys to leave, and he might be asking a guy to leave again real soon. On that note, he had this to say about making changes and missing some things during the regular season.
In itself, one thing is not a huge thing, but I think, when you start adding up a number of things, maybe we need to make a couple of changes to move a couple of guys in areas, whether it's coaches or players. Again,
narrow margins, really, really narrow margins set this team and any team up for success or failure over the course of a 17-game schedule. Dan moved on to something that I think is really important because a lot of people, myself included, have noticed the number of Lions that you see on national ad campaigns. I think there were 7 at my last count, including the head man being the assistant manager there for Applebee's. A lot of distractions come with success, and a lot of different systems come with success, and some of that involves getting comfortable. And it sure sounds like Dan Campbell is aware of that and is going to do something about it.
I want to get back to some of the things we were doing a couple of years ago, and what I say and what I mean by that is just getting back to a little bit of what we did at the ground level, man. Just little bit at the way we train, the way we go about things. You know, this can be a good training camp for us.
He wouldn't elaborate on what it was he wanted to get back to, and he was asked about that directly. But you can bet that the players in that locker room who will be coming back for 2026 know exactly what it is that they need to get back to. And obviously some of them missed it. Penei Sewell said something very similar in his season-ending interview in the locker room on the way out, that he needs to do some things differently. He needs to stay closer to teammates, that they need to be a little bit tighter. I think everybody got caught maybe feeling themselves a little bit, had a lot of success. It is a good football team. There's no reason to say anything else. This is a good football team. They're still a 9-win squad, and they could have been much better with just a couple of things going their way. But this Lions team is already aware of and working on the things that they feel they left behind or lacked headed into the 2025 season. And that brings me to the final thing that he said, and this is the most foreboding. If you work on Republican Drive in Allen Park and don't have your LinkedIn account up to date, you might want to get on that.
First thing I got to figure out is the staff. I need to make sure that, where do we go from here? I just need to make sure that I feel good about, where the guys are at, the positions they're in, or do we tweak a couple of things, move a couple of guys? Do we stay pat? Those are the things I got to sort through. That's the first for me. That's what I got to get through. And I got to do some digging here.
Hard to misinterpret that. It's just hard to misinterpret that. The first thing on the man's mind coming out of this season is, does he have the right staff? The first thing on his mind was, does he have the right staff? And I think that means no, right? That's an answer. Asking that question is an answer in and of itself. And I don't think anybody with an office at the Lions headquarters in Allen Park should be getting real comfortable. A lot of people are going to interpret that to mean John Morton. I think that's likely. I still don't know if it involves play calling. I still don't know if he's going to get the new hire right, because he's gotten 2 wrong so far with Anthony Lynn and now John Morton. If that goes that way, I don't think Kelvin Shepard necessarily can be real comfortable. And then any and all of the position coaches. And there's a lot of turnover on any team amongst the position coaches from year to year. But I certainly would expect to see in the coming days and weeks some changes made on that coaching staff. And when the head man steps up to the podium and the first thing he says is, I got to look at my staff, that's the first thing I have to do. I don't know, man. If you got anything heavy in your office, you might want to move it out to your car. Moving on to a salute to Decker. I don't know if this was the last game that he plays as a Detroit Lion. He doesn't know if this is the last game that he's going to play as a Detroit Lion, but it sure sounded like it. There are a lot of signs that are pointing that way, and there aren't any other players on that roster that I think are more due their flowers for not just how they've played, but the length of career that they've had, the way that they've conducted themselves off the field, and the product that they put on it. Taylor Decker is a guy that if you could make a roster out of 53 Taylor Deckers, you'd never lose. At that point, you got a team full of Shoresies, and you'll never lose again. And he absolutely deserves all the credit that he's going to get if and when this was it. And even if it's not, maybe he comes back for another year and he does play out his contract. He still deserves all the credit in the world for the way he soldiered through this season, especially when things started going badly and a lot of guys could have and would have hung it up. He had a lot to say about how his season went, some of which got kind of emotional when he talked about his family. Here he is just talking about his process and how he'll think about things in the offseason.
I would imagine it's going to be a couple months. I need to get away. I need to get away from football. I need to get my body feeling better. I need to make informed decisions. I need to get second opinions. There's a lot that I have to do because I want to make this decision moving forward informed and I don't want to make it emotionally, because if I make it emotionally, I already know what the answer is going to be.
Given the emotion of the moment, like everything else Taylor's done, first class, I think he answered the question pretty well and addressed everything that he's going to go through. He also talked about the decision that he's got to make and how it's not about him, and the difference between making a selfish decision to continue to play and all of the other people in his life that depend on him and that he'd like to be there for. And it's easy to forget as a fan, certainly the fantasy football psychos or the degenerate gamblers who just need these guys out there beating their heads against a wall week in and week out. It's easy to forget the toll that it takes on not just your body, but all of your relationships and everything else that's going on in your life.
It's not only about me, it's about my kids. I'll get emotional about that, but just to be able to show up and be the father that I want to be. It's not about, do I want to play football? So that's really important to me. Because I can make the selfish decision. I can keep playing until I can't walk anymore, or I can't throw the ball with my kids. But that's not what you do as a father and a husband. So that's going to weigh heavily into my decision. Is what is the future quality of life of mine going to look like, and how will that impact my kids? I think the biggest thing is I just want to get away, because like it's been really challenging for me mentally, just being in pain all the time, and knowing that you have to go out there and play anyway. I mean, I'm definitely I'm just not in a good mental state right now. I'm not sleeping well. I mean, I need to get away.
So there it is. I just thought it was worth saying. If this is the last time Taylor Decker got out onto the field with the Detroit Lions, man, as a fan, thank you. You can't ask for more, I don't think, as a fan, than what Taylor put out there through all the bullshit coaching regimes and the garbage decisions that were made from the top all the way through this recent run with the new crew, and seeing some success finally, thankfully, in his career in a Detroit uniform, and getting to see the city celebrate this team for a change. So I don't know if it was the last thing. I do know that if he's the blueprint, and if this is the kind of dude that Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and the personnel department and the scouts, if this is the guy they're looking for and they want to make the team out of this kind of dude with that kind of DNA, the Lions are going to be just fine for a good long time to come. And I want to wrap things up with a look at the road ahead. I've been a fan of this team for a long, long time. Somewhere in the photo albums from my deceased parents, I have pictures of myself when I was 6 years old with the Lions helmet that I got as a Christmas present. I slept in it for a week. I've been dying with this team for a long, long time. I've loved them for my entire life. It has mostly been unrequited. I've never been able to say what I'm about to say in my life with any credibility. I could never say it and believe it. I've never been more sure that the Lions can fix what's wrong and get better next year. Never been more certain of it. Again, this is a team with a winning record. They didn't go to the playoffs, and that's the part that sucks. I get that. But you can see, without squinting, you can see what's wrong with this team. You know you've got to patch up the offensive line. You probably have a Taylor Decker-sized hole that just jumped to the front of the line. You know you need to look for a center in free agency. You know you got to figure out the safety situation, not just the personnel, but also the defensive scheme. You know you've got some linebacker depth issues that are coming up with Alex Anzalone likely gone. I know those things, and I'm just a guy watching a game. So they know those things. The money people, they're going to be tested like never before. That's a different level of challenge, because now all of those contract extensions are coming due, and you are going to be cap strapped in Detroit in a way that you haven't been. But none of that was unplanned. Everybody knew what those contracts look like. Everybody understands the duration. Mike Disner and the rest of those boys are going to be working on that. Again, it's a new challenge, but it's not unexpected, and it's not something they're unprepared for. This is the difference between a good year and a good foundation. 2006, the Lions had a good year. 1991, the Lions had a good year. They didn't have a good foundation in any of those years. And the difference between a good year and a good foundation is what it looks like moving forward. And it's not that hard to see what needs to be done. And it's not anything that can't be done. You can't fix ownership. When William Clay Ford was in charge, that was it. That you were done. There was nothing that could be done outside of the owner's box to fix that. When you had Tom LaWand in charge, you couldn't fix that. The mismanagement of the contracts, there was nothing you could do to get in there in the player negotiations and try to unscrew up the Ndamukong Suh spot. There's nothing you could do to keep Matt Millen from drafting a wide receiver year after year after year. This team's not in that situation at all. They've got a ton of talent. The skill positions on offense are locked in. The defensive front is going to come back stronger than it was this year. There are additions to be had in the draft. There are clear free agent moves that have to be made. But the difference between a good year that's just random and a good foundation is the confidence that I have saying this. I've never been more sure the Lions can get this fixed and be a better team next year. They go in, they're going to have to do a real deep self-scout. They made a lot of changes on the coaching staff. Not all of that's their fault, but 8 coaches in all. Some of them didn't work. And so they need to go in and get that fixed. But again, I can see that. The O-line has to be better, but I can see that. The pressure's on. That is the one thing that might affect this. If I'm being fair and curbing my own enthusiasm ever so slightly about what's possible with this team, it's that now, because of the failure of this season, because of the stink fest down the stretch, because of that game against Pittsburgh, because of losing to Brosmer, because of the stench of the way the defense played after all of those injuries, the pressure's on. Because you can't do this again. If you're Dan Campbell, you can't come out and have another garbage season, because then it's all hot seats. Then it's all panic moves. Then you're not thinking about the future, which is something the Lions have been able to do for 5 straight years. They have been able to build towards a vision with a common goal and all of the collaboration they like to talk about in Allen Park so much. They have been able to do that with a clear, unfettered view of the future. If you have another garbage season, that future is a much, much nearer term issue. And I think that gets in the way of doing business the right way. They have been able to build year on year with 3 and 5 year windows in mind. And if they want to do that, they need to get this offseason right. But I believe that they can. And I have never felt like that as a fan ever. I have never felt like this team has what it takes, both from an intellectual horsepower standpoint and from a resources and dedication standpoint, plus all of the personnel that exist already on the roster, to put it all back together and come back and be one of the top teams in the NFL. I believe that they can do it. I've never been able to say it took half a century to get there. But here we are. And I'm sure somebody has hit record on this, and it'll be on Freezing Cold Takes or whatever Detroit's version of Cable Thanos' 2026 collection. If it all goes in the ditch, I will look like an idiot. But everything you need to see with this team is there in terms of taking that next step, fixing what's wrong, and moving forward in a positive direction. And short of going to the playoffs and giving us some fun football to watch, that's about all I can ask for. So that's where I'll wrap it up, man. Thank you again. Please subscribe to the channel. It's not just me. Risden's on here every day. We got Bish and Brown. Chris bombs in. I think we have that roundtable show coming up with the entire cast and crew from DLP coming up on Thursday at some point. We'll be in touch about that with all the socials. So until next time, man, it's been a fun season. Thank you so much for anybody that took the time for any of these shows. And I'll see ya. Bye.